You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Welcome in, everybody. Ethan here.
Mike here.
And welcome to the Blue Note Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Blues. It's episode number 11.
That's right. It's the Brian Sutter episode. I don't think you can go number 11, retired and up in the rafters. Nobody else.
Yeah, I think that's the clear choice for sure. No doubt about it. Probably there's going to be, as we go along, I don't know really what's going to happen when we get to 100, but we'll figure that out. But there's certainly going to be a lot of numbers where you're like, okay, it's that guy.
Yeah.
And 11 is one of them. I think, 16 is probably one of them.
Who?
Well, guy was pretty good.
We'll see. We'll see when we get there.
We will see. Absolutely. But before we get into it, thank you to the listeners for listening to the podcast and the watchers for watching the podcast, because we do have it on the YouTube, the Believe Network YouTube. You get to see our faces, which I don't know if people enjoy that as much, but you get to hear the St. Louis Blues talk, and we're trying to, get as much out there as we can. This is the second episode of the week. I think the offseason, our big goal is one episode a week at least, and we're getting 2 this week. So I think that's pretty good. But if you enjoy, give us a 5-star rating. If you like what we're doing, of course, you can leave a comment, get involved with the conversation over on the Twitter at TBNPod. You can follow us there. More so just kind of little comments and retweeting. I think as we go along with this thing, we'll probably have some more interacting on Twitter, just because unless there's a game going on or a major event, there's really not much analysis to do. And we're not really doing that as much on Twitter. But of course, you can read our analytical stuff, not hockey analytics, but, analyzing a game on the hockeywriters.com, of course. But you can share the podcast on social media, and other Blues and Thunderbirds fans will be able to check that out as well. We'll get to the Thunderbirds in a moment, but this is a good episode because we have an exciting interview with Peter Harling of Dobber Hockey and NHL Trade Rumors. He joined us. Great interview with him. He was really good talking about various Blues prospects and kind of what the draft is this year, how to view the draft, what the Blues could do at 23, and then some other stuff for some, overall. If you're not a Blues fan, you're listening to this, we still have some normal NHL stuff. We did talk about the top of the draft as well, which those are guys that the Blues are not going to get. So that's another part of this. And we've also got some stuff on the Thunderbirds as well. Pretty good in terms of this run. I think it's going well personally, but let's get to the Thunderbirds now. And then after that, we'll throw it over to Peter. Just what do you think about the Thunderbirds right now?
Them Grease Lightning Thunderbirds are headed to the Calder Cup Finals.
I wanted to save that line.
Woo! Oh man. I don't know how you can't make any single Grease reference here possible. I'm not a huge Grease fan, but when somebody told me that, our AHL affiliate is going to be the Thunderbirds, and I said, all them T-Birds. So this is fantastic. They had a 4-0 shutout here to win it. Old Charlie Sideburns Lindgren posted 34 saves, 34 of 34. Matthew Pekka, he opened up the scoring here on the power play with a goal here in the first period. Blues forward here now, spending time here back and forth. Dakota Joshua, he scored 2 goals in the game. And of course, Nathan Todd scored goal number 3 here to end out the second period here at this point. But boy, oh boy, these guys are looking like studs. They're going to be playing the Blues' former AHL
Revenge
Chicago Wolves.
Revenge series.
Yes. And we're not going to really be able to dive into to that episode or to the game in the series here at this point, just as of yet. We're going to wait, just a little bit. But the first game here is going to be Sunday, June 19th at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time. So be able to get on that AHL TV, be able to take a look here at it. By the time that we get the chance here to be able to record here again, we'll probably have about a game or 2 maybe here underneath of their belts.
Yeah.
Give or take at that point. So, boy, I'm excited.
It's going to be great. And to do it against Chicago would be great as well. Obviously a former affiliate. Of course, the Blues have had about 737 former affiliates in the last 10 years, but that's all right. Obviously
5 years here at this point.
San Antonio, and then they had to play that year in Utica. It's a whole big thing. But great performance by Chucky in Game 7. Chicago's going to be an interesting series because anything that I've read about that series, Chicago's got a very veteran team.
Yeah.
Going to be hard to beat, but this is kind of an electrifying mix that the Thunderbirds have. They have a lot of guys that have contributed in some way for the Blues this season. Like Dakota Joshua came up and did his thing. Matthew Pekka, I thought, was good when he was here as well.
Yep.
James Neal's been a timely goal scorer for them as well. So I have confidence in the T-Birds. The goaltending is a big factor, but we'll see what happens. So that series starts on Sunday, June 19th, like you said. So you can check that out. I guess it's still on the AHL website, those games?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
All right. Let's go ahead and send it over to Peter Harling of Dobber Hockey and NHL Trade Rumors. We sat down with him, talked all things St. Louis Blues prospects and the NHL draft as well. Let's send it over now to Peter.
All right. We are welcoming in a very special guest here today, Peter Harling. If you guys do not know, Peter just does fantastic work here over at Dobber Hockey and NHL Trade Rumors. Of course, if you want to be able to listen to him, he is the host over at DobberProspects Radio. So, Peter, thanks so much here for being able to join us here today. How's it going?
It's going great, man. Thank you so much for inviting me onto the show. I love getting the opportunity to be on other podcasts. So thank you so much for extending the vine.
Nope, absolutely. And this is just something, we were mentioning here off air, but, you just do such fantastic work here. The analysis, I just absolutely love, and it's something that I followed here for a little while. So it's just great being able to connect here with you and be able to have you on. So, we're going to be able to break down a couple of Blues prospects here. So Ethan, let's go ahead and start breaking a couple of guys down.
Yeah, I think first of all, Peter, thank you for joining us. Of course, I think the big thing for the Blues, prospect system is it's really headlined by the first round picks that they've had the last couple of seasons. And number one on that list for me, I know a lot of people love another guy we're going to discuss later, but Jake Neighbors, captain of the Edmonton Oil Kings, just won the WHL championship. A lot out in front of him. He had a 9-game tryout for the Blues last season. Peter, how do you view Jake Neighbors right now, and kind of maybe not his overall upside, but just where he's at right now and kind of moving forward? How do you look at him as a prospect?
Yeah, I'd have to say I'm a pretty big fan of his, actually. I love the way that he plays the game with a lot of Charlie hustle. He can impact the game in a lot of ways. He's a very talented offensive player. He can score gritty, greasy, in the crease kind of goals. Like if you take a shot and the goalie gets it, that's not going to stop him from jamming away at it. He can score from range. He can set up plays. So I like his skill level. And like I said, even if he's not contributing offensively, he's still contributing in other ways. He competes hard on back checks. He's hungry for the puck at all times, and he gets the puck and he's just full steam ahead to the other team's goal. And, if he can go around players, we can go through them. If they give him a lane, he'll take it. If they don't, he'll make it. He's a fun player to watch. And I think he's got a lot of upside.
I think that's the big reason why Doug Armstrong liked him so much. Like, he fits so well in what the Blues want out of their forwards. I think we saw some of that. I know he was obviously not ready to play a full season in the NHL. When he had the 9-game tryout, he did score a goal, but he does everything. And I think that's what the Blues want in their forwards. And I think that's why, people may not have expected him to go there. I didn't expect him to go there. I didn't think the Blues would take him. I definitely thought he was a first-round guy. I'm no scout or, an analyst for the draft by any means, but I think that's kind of why the Blues loved him so much. It's like he does everything, and that's exactly what they want out of their forwards. And I think, having him playing with veterans like he did last season, a little bit with Braden Shen, those types of guys, I think it's only going to help him. And he was really, really good for Edmonton in the WHL this season. So I agree with everything you said. And I think that's exactly why the Blues loved him so much, is because he does everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So a guy here that I want to really ask you here about is somebody that I have been up and down here on for quite a while. Klim Kostin. He's only 23 years old. He has struggled to find a consistent role here in the NHL. He was ultimately sent down to the AHL, and now he'll be playing alongside of hhis teammates for the Calder Cup, which is just fantastic. And he has really picked up his game here in the playoffs. We were talking with Ryan Smith, the play-by-play announcer here for the Springfield Thunderbirds, and he had nothing but great things to say here about Klim Kostin. And just as a reminder, that he is only 23 years old. So what do you see from a guy like Klim Kostin here moving forward?
Yeah, so it seems like it's been forever that we've been waiting for him to arrive in the NHL, right? Like he's a 2017 entry draft guy, 31st pick. So he was the last pick of the first round in his draft. And at the draft, I was talking to a lot of people who are better at this than I am, like Russ Cohen, for example. He and I had a long chat about Klim Kostin, and most of the people I talked to were all telling me pretty similar things, that he's got great size and he's got good skill and he can shoot the puck. And he's not your typical Russian player where he's skill and finesse. He's more North American style where he's equally happy to score a goal or punch someone in the face. Like he studied boxing in the off season.
And that's something St. Louis fans really do enjoy, that gritty style.
Absolutely. Me too. And so he's a big man. In his draft year, he was, he's one of the biggest players in the draft. He's 6'4", 212, and he's a decent skater. So I think a lot of people, myself included, had the expectations of, well, he was a late first round pick, but this will be a short development curve before we see him in the NHL and contributing at the NHL level and in fantasy rosters. And it's very tempting to think that this could be a player with the upside of, 30 goals and close to 100 penalty minutes, like a Tom Wilson kind of player.
Yeah.
And he's had opportunities to crack the Blues roster, and he's not been able to do that. Now, that's no slight against him. I mean, they're a championship roster. They won the Stanley Cup not too long ago. So they're still a cup contender, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, you look at, he's got 40 games in the NHL this season, and he's only got 9 points. So are we thinking that his offensive ceiling, we might need to dial down those 30 goal expectations? Yeah, perhaps. But he can still be an impactful player. And I think his AHL development time should be in the rearview mirror now.
Yeah. And it's just, for me especially, it's frustrating to see that the very next day and just a few picks later, the Central Division, one of the Central Division rivals here of the Dallas Stars, selected Jason Robertson. And he is lighting the NHL here on fire. And so being able to see a guy like that go and perform so well and be such an impactful player still so young versus a guy like Klim Kostin, and again, it's very, very small sample size. And so being able to just say, automatically a Jason Robertson is going to have more impact on the game than a guy like Klim Kostin is still very, very unfair here to both players. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Blues do with a guy like Klim, because, we were talking here on our podcast here earlier. The Blues don't really have a lot of roster space available here at this point. And so Kostin's going to potentially have to grab one of those last spots and potentially a fourth line role if he wants to be able to contend. So it's going to be interesting if the Blues start him out in the AHL again, or if he starts out, with an NHL role, and how they want to be able to play this.
It's a problem. Like I think for Kostin, it's like, yeah, he hasn't been great in the opportunities he's gotten, but he hasn't gotten that many great opportunities, because when he's up here, he's not really playing on a prime line. Like he's more so playing maybe third line, probably fourth line. I think it's maybe a little bit of Doug Armstrong being so good at building depth to the point where he's been passed up by a couple guys, most notably this season, Alexei Toropchenko. And I think maybe part of the problem for Kostin is just the opportunity hasn't been great. And it's kind of the Blues having the depth that they have kind of killing Kostin and losing him. But he's won at multiple levels, because he was obviously on that avant-garde team that won in the KHL. And I thought that would help him a lot in his development, to get to the next level, because before the pandemic hit, he looked pretty good for the Blues. He scored a big goal, I remember, against Nashville in that early year 2020. And I thought, the development was going better. I thought he was starting to finally get there. This is 3 years after the draft. And it just hasn't hit. But I mean, maybe playing in the AHL the way he has this season has been good. And speaking of a guy who really dominated the AHL when he was there this season, would be Scott Brunovich, who we've seen a lot of in St. Louis this year in the NHL. Just a really, really good player with the puck on the back end. And I think a guy that a lot of people are very, very high on. Peter, like, how high are you on Brunovich, and what do you think of his upside and maybe his fit in the NHL right now?
So I like his upside a lot. He's a highly decorated NCAA graduate, where he was the Hobey Baker winner there. He played on the World Juniors and it was pretty impressive there. He's been dominant in his transition to the American Hockey League. And what I find really particularly impressive about that is he basically lost an entire season to injury the year before the pandemic shut things down. And then there was the pandemic season where everything was limited. So, he lost some key development, time. So going forward, I mean, he's torched up the American Hockey League, and he's proven to be too good to play there. And I'm anxious to see what he can do once he's got now he's got some time under his belt, where he's played some pro games here now, and he's 17 games in the American Hockey League at 22 points. And he's a defenseman. He's over a point a game player as a defenseman, which is incredible. And he didn't play any games in 2021. So the upside there is, I think, an elite number one offensive defenseman. Maybe not quite in the same category as Cale Makar or Quinn Hughes, but close. I think his upside is elite.
If you can be able to say to Blues, we've got a Cale Makar light version, that just speaks volumes. There's a number of people who are saying to potentially trade him in a package to acquire like a Jacob Chikrin or something like that here at this point. And I'm just saying, hold the phone here. Hang on. You have no idea what we have here at this point. He has very, very limited NHL experience, and like you said, he has just lit the world here on fire at every single level that he has seen. And, he doesn't need to go back to the AHL at this point. He just doesn't. He needs to be in the NHL. He needs to be here with the team, building the chemistry, and he needs to be able to get the time. And that's where the Blues, I think, really have a big logjam, especially with Torrey Krug not necessarily taking a number one spot here alongside of Colton Parayko. And maybe a guy like a Brunovich could be able to fit well with a Parayko. Don't really know that here just as of yet. And so it'll be interesting to see. But another guy, we could end up seeing here next season who has really, really developed here, especially over these playoffs, is goaltender Joel Hofer. Another highly decorated guy, another highly decorated prospect that we could be able to see sooner than later. I don't know if it may be next season here, but boy, he is certainly making a case that he needs to get a real good look here at this point. So are we looking potentially at a number one, like a top 10 goalie in the league here with Joel?
Well, I think you look at what is his competition for roster positions, because that's the challenge with goalies, right? You can only play one at a time. And they've got Binnington signed long-term. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if the Blues were going to try and get out from behind that contract, but good luck with that. Philly Husso's an unrestricted free agent. He played well enough that he's going to garner plenty of interest. So that'll be a challenge for them to keep him. So who are the other prospects that St. Louis has that can challenge Joel Hofer? I don't see any.
Really, nobody.
Yeah,
really
sorry
nobody.
about that. Yeah, I don't want to, slide anybody, but it's a pretty short list. So where are we with his development path right now? Okay, so he is, 21 years old? Yeah, 21 years old. He's got NHL height, 6'5". So there's a chance. And he's got 2 years basically of pro development under his belt. 39 games in the AHL last year, with a pretty decent record. So, if I'm St. Louis, they watch him a lot more than I have in the American Hockey League. They'll have a better handle if they think that he's ready to step right into the NHL. And that would be a pretty tall order for someone at his age, and goalies can have a tendency to take a little bit longer to develop. Yeah. So I think if I'm the Blues, I probably look at acquiring another veteran option on a short-term contract that's kind of a minimal sort of investment here, that you don't have a 6-year contract where you've got a log jam in net, and if they don't pan out, then you're really euchred. So just like someone to bide some time, allow Hofer to develop in the American Hockey League at a pace that's suitable to him, and he doesn't have to rush, and they don't put him in a situation where he's set up to fail. And then when he's ready to knock the door down and step into the NHL, then it's easy to make room for him. You've got a player with a short-term contract or whatever, or an expiring contract perhaps, and then you're all set.
Yeah. So we could be still looking at another like 2 years, which is something I think that, Ethan and I had discussed here previously, that, Hofer could be able to make a strong case for a backup role, but what's more beneficial here for him, to be able to get that backup role in the NHL, or to be able to get number one playing time in the AHL. And I think for his development, and like you said, his age and whatnot, he needs to be getting a lot of minutes, a lot of reps, seeing a lot of pucks. And I think time here in the AHL is going to be the best thing here for him. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So moving to the final prospect we'll discuss here is the Blues 2021 first round pick. Zachary Balduc had a big season in the queue this year for the Rimparts. And I think a lot of Blues fans are kind of looking at that and being like, okay, he's the next guy. But I also think that you need to temper the expectations a little bit with him right now, because I don't think that, 99 points at any level is great, but the Q's not the best junior league by any means at all. So how do you view Balduc and what he did this year for Quebec in the QMJHL, and kind of what his timeline could be moving forward?
All right. So 100 points basically in the queue this year. So it's hard to ignore that. That's that demands some attention and some respect. But what I wrote about him is that he's a bit of a boom or bust kind of a player, right? Like, he's got really great offensive skills. He's a really good skater. He can handle the puck very well. He's elusive. He employs deception with his intentions, his pass recipients, and where he's going and what he's thinking. And he's lighting it up offensively. So where does my bust concern come from? Well, if you watch him, he makes these great plays, but he also makes some really bad ones. His decision making with the puck can be questionable. So, and those are some things that can be coached and trained out of a game. There were some similar thoughts about that with Jason Spezza when he was coming up. He was a very, very prolific offensive scorer in junior. But even in the NHL, it took him a few years to shake the habit of making drop passes after he went over the blue line to like nobody and giving up breakaways for the other team. But if Balduc can't iron out some of those concerns, there's the margin for error in the junior levels is much wider than it is at the pro level, like let alone the NHL. Like you just can't be making mistakes like that at the NHL level, because it's in your net almost every time.
Yeah.
So that's my concern with him. Do I think he's got superstar offensive upside at the NHL? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's 100 points in junior. Like, kid's got skills. But is he more of a liability than anything else? That time will tell. He'll have to hone that out. I think he might have one more year of junior eligibility. He's 19 years old now, so yeah, one more year to go. And then I think you'll see a a development curve in the American Hockey League where he'll adjust to the pro level. He'll have a lot less time and space with the puck. There'll be a lot more pressure on him to make quick decisions with the puck. How he responds will tell you how it's going to go going forward.
Yeah. Still a couple seasons away here at this point. So, that's fine. And the Blues have a number of different young and up and coming prospects and, some contracts to figure out here at this point. So there's absolutely no rush here for a guy like Balduc. So let's turn our attention here really fast. We've got the upcoming draft that's going to start here on July 7th. It's 3 weeks here to the day that we're recording this. The Blues are going to be drafting 23rd overall. I've got a couple different ideas as far as, who and what kind of position that they should be looking here at. But what do you see as being, maybe a couple of trade targets, a couple of draft targets here for them, or even just like some, a position that they should try and go for? What would you do if you're in the driver's seat?
Well, so your first round pick, I think you want to try and get a sure thing in the first round, right? Like depending on how many picks you have, and the Blues only have the one at 23rd. So I don't think they're going to want to necessarily, and your prospect pool isn't the deepest in the NHL either. So I think you want to secure an asset that has a lot of promise and their potential. Mm-hmm. So a low risk factor, like maybe their ceiling isn't as high, but their floor isn't necessarily a bust. As far as positional need goes, I think you worry about that at other times and not at the draft. I think you just go ahead and take the best player available. So looking at my draft rankings at 20, I goes Isaac Howard and Jimmy Snuggerud from the National Team Development Plan. Mm-hmm. Snuggerud would maybe be a nice fit there. He's kind of the gritty player as well. Lane Hudson is in that neighborhood as well. A little undersized at 5'9", 148, but probably one of the most skilled defensemen in the draft. If you wanted to take a swing at a couple of players, there might be some guys there that you could do that with Ivan Miroshnichenko, or maybe even Brad Lambert might fall that far. I've seen him. He's just all over the map, right? And depending who you talk to, they're like, oh, he's a top 10 pick. Yeah, he had a bad season, but he's still a top 10 pick. And there's other people who are like, he's on our do not draft list. So, he's a little bit of a wild card there. This year's Atu Ratty, perhaps. So anyways, there's a couple guys, maybe Owen Pickering, if you want to go on the blue line, or Ryan Chesley is another NTDB player who's really caught fire in the scouting community in the last quarter of the season. Basically, he's really turned some heads and started to get some lip service.
Awesome. So I wrote an article at thehockeywriters.com with 3 first round draft targets, kind of based on different boards and what people think about them. I think a couple of them are probably going to be, you got to get lucky for them to be there at 23, maybe. But the first one I had was Jagger Ferkus, who has a great name, first of all. And I think he's a guy that would be a good fit on the wing. And then I also had Seamus Casey, who's a, kind of feels like a boomer bust type defenseman from what I read about him. Another guy who's not big defensively, but a lot of skill. And I also think that a lot of people, from what I read, really like Casey's defensive game. So that's something to think about. And then I did have Isaac Howard as my third one there. So how do you look at those 3 and maybe the possibility of them being there at 23rd, and how you view them as prospects with respect to Ferkus, Casey, and Howard?
So if Jagger Ferkus is available at 23, you run up to the stage to draft him.
No take backsies.
Yeah, I like him a lot. He really, really caught my eye at the CHL Top Prospects game. He's got an NHL ready shot. Mm-hmm. He's offensively, I think he's pretty close to NHL ready. Now, there's a lot of other components of his game that need a lot of development before he'll be in the NHL. He's got to get a lot stronger. He's 5'10" and he only weighs 150 pounds. So he's got to eat some protein shakes and whatnot.
Give this guy a cheeseburger.
Yeah, cheeseburgers for breakfast, maybe. So I said I wouldn't necessarily endorse taking a swing on a player who's a boom or bust, but I just don't see Jagger Ferkus as more of a bust kind of a player. He's going to take a long time, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I like him a lot. Now, in terms of Seamus Casey, he did not make my first round. In fact, I may be a little bit bullish on Jagger Ferkus. I had him ranked really high, like 13th. And I'm a little bearish on Seamus Casey. I had him ranked 56th. Now, in terms of drafting players who you think are very good defensively, that's not a player you draft in the first round. They're kind of a dime a dozen. You can get them in later rounds. It's not a God-given skill to play really good defensively. It's determination and character and coaching that allows you to be good defensively. And there's a lot of guys that can develop that. Who was your third guy? Sorry,
Isaac Howard, who you did mention.
Yeah, he's right in the wheelhouse there at 20th. So, and that's just my rankings. But he would be a great pick for them there. I think he's a very skilled forward. He's got a lot of upside. He's going to take some time as well. I can't remember where he's committed to for the NCAA. And that where players go in college hockey kind of factors in a little bit with where I see them going forward. There's certain programs are a little bit more renowned for developing players. So I'd have to look up where he's going. But yeah, those are all my thoughts on those guys. Isaac Howard would be a great pick at that range.
So since Zoom appears to be giving us a time crunch because I don't want to pay for it monthly, we'll rapid fire the rest of this here. Just in terms of the draft itself, a few quick questions about other teams, or maybe at least the top part of the draft. Number one would be, and I think it's a question that a lot of people are throwing around, is Shane Wright the clear number one still?
He's my number one. I don't know how clear that is. I think it's a 3-man race there. And I think it'll just come down to team preference. Just some people talk about positional need there. Montreal is thin at center. And I think I put more, maybe less of a positional need, but I put more emphasis on centers and defensemen than wingers. So that gives Wright and Cooley the edge over Slafkovsky, perhaps. But for me, and I just released a DPR podcast with the Kingston Frontenac's TV host Alan Edmansky, and we talked a long time about Shane Wright, and so we kind of went over him in depth, reviewed his season and his upside, and I think he's a player that's going to step into the NHL right away. I think his comparison to Patrice Bergeron is a good one. And, while people might be thinking Shane Wright exceptional status, and they're a little underwhelmed with his almost 100-point season this year in his draft year, well, okay, so he's not Connor McDavid, but like there's Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Connor McDavid. Like that's a short list, man.
Mm-hmm.
So he might not be a Connor McDavid, but he's also not Nail Yakupov.
Yeah.
Right.
Blue
So
fans are all too familiar with Nail Yakupov.
So there's that. And if you compare him to, if he turns out to be Patrice Bergeron,
pretty good.
That's pretty good, man. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah. I think people are probably looking forward to next year's draft and who the number one guy is in that draft, and how there's like some really, really, really good prospects in that top three. So that's going to be something to look forward to.
Well, that's what I thought about this year, right? Going into this year, about 2 years out, I was like, okay, so we've got Shane Wright, exceptional status. We've got Matt Savoy, who, people have been talking about for a long time. We've got Brad Lambert, who is, going to be the first Finnish-born player to go first overall in the draft. And then now it's just Shane Wright and some other guys we weren't even talking about. So who knows what'll happen with the 2023 draft, but there are some pretty good names there.
Yeah, it seems
that
like
Bedard kid's all right.
It seems like Michkov's pretty trustworthy as well. So
yes, then there's the Russian factor.
Yeah, it's true. Real quick, I got one more here. how do you view a couple players like David Jiricek and Connor Geekie, who I think a lot of people have varying opinions on both of them? Obviously, Geekie, a big forward. I don't really know what the opinion of scouts on him is, but how do you view him and Jiricek as well?
So Connor Geekie's 6'4", 205, so he's got the size going for him. And he's got some pretty good skill as well. I didn't have him in my top 10. I am 13th.
Fair.
So yeah, he can impact the game a couple different ways too, right? He's got his size working for him, and he's got some hands, so he can produce some offense as well. Whether or not that offense translates at the NHL level, like whoever knows. And David Jiricek, I have him ranked 4th. You could toss a coin basically between him and Simon Nemec. They're both very good. But I kind of like Jiricek. So Nemec might be a better top pairing defenseman, but Jiricek brings a couple of things that he might not be a top 2, but he's definitely a top 4. He's got a better shot. He's got a little bit more jam to his game too. So I flip a coin, but I gave the edge to Jiricek.
All right. Mike, you got anything else?
No, I just want to be able to thank you here again for being able to come on the podcast. Where can we be able to find, so, you just mentioned that you just released here a new podcast. I haven't had the chance to be able to listen here to it, but I'm really excited. Where else can fans be able to find your stuff? What we can be looking forward to?
So I did a season-long series for NHL Trade Rumors doing their top 10 prospect rankings for each NHL team. I just contributed to the DobberProspects prospect report. So if you're in a fantasy league, that's a dynasty league or a keeper, that's a must-have.
16 team. Yep.
Yeah, that's a must-have piece of information. So yeah, I write occasionally for DobberProspects. I'm more on the podcast side now. My day job and personal life has kind of limited my ability to spend as much time on this as I'd like. But yeah, find me on Twitter at PHARLING @Farling or the DPR_show. Those are the 2 Twitter accounts that I have. And if you like what you hear, check out the DobberProspects radio podcast. It's on all your regular formats. And the draft rankings that I'm talking about, I'll be releasing that hopefully within the next week. In an article on NHL Trade Rumors as well.
All right. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. And as for the rest of this episode 11 of the Blue Note podcast, we'll send you to the outro right now. All right. Thank you to Peter for joining us. Great talk with him. Obviously very knowledgeable in the field, Dobber hockey, and NHL Trade Rumors. You can follow him there. He said his Twitter there at the end. So check him out for sure. Maybe we'll get him on again down the road. Maybe even this offseason, who knows? But
such a great guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Great on-air and off-air conversations for sure. So thanks to him for joining us. And episode 12 is coming soon. Next week, probably. We got 2 episodes out this week. We hope to get episode 12 next week. I'm sure we will. We don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, but we'll talk more of the offseason. I'm sure maybe even a little bit more of the draft. We'll update you on the Thunderbird series. And then we'll update you around maybe what's going on in the Central Division and maybe the NHL as a whole. Because, days like today, you got 2 moves that happened on this Thursday. This is uploaded on Friday, but yesterday, I guess you could call it now. You had number 1, you had Evgeny Dadonov getting traded from Vegas to Montreal for Shea Weber. Shea Weber, virtually an LTIR guy, not going to play for Vegas. So Vegas, once again, bending the rules a little bit to do the LTIR thing, which is within the rules, but still kind of annoying. But either way, I think that's a great trade for Montreal to get a guy they can slot into their current top 6 for Shea Weber, who's probably never going to play again. So that's a good move. And then you also had a former Blue.
You also had Sammy Blais re-sign here out of New York. He had the 1-year contract that he signed worth $1.525 million. So, very shortened season here for him. Extremely unfortunate here. With that injury here early in the season. And so, I think the Rangers really want to see what Sammy can be able to bring here next year with a full healthy season. So former Blue staying here up in the in the Northeast.
Yeah, I think this tells us that the Rangers definitely want to have Sammy Blais in their lineup. 1.5 mil is a good number. And I always liked Sammy Blais a lot. Like, I always liked what he brought to the team. Like 2019, he was a big part of getting through the San Jose series specifically because he was hitting guys. And very often he was doing that. So I always appreciate him for that. And people like kind of make fun of the trade for Buchnevich, which, I mean, it was kind of a laughable return for what Buchnevich is. But at the time, you got to look at it from the Rangers side of point of view. Like they already have a ton of skill, and Buchnevich is great, but he was going to need an extension, and they needed a little bit more sandpaper. And I think Blais was that before he had the unfortunate ACL injury, which was that on the PK Subban thing, which, dirty for sure.
Expert.
But I mean, second round pick. 100% worth it for the Blues and probably worth it for the Rangers. Like the Rangers got further than the Blues this year, which say what you will about that. But I mean, I know they faced some pretty, not so good goaltenders before Vasilevsky, but they still got further. So hopefully Sammy Blais can recover from the injury and be well again. But I think that'll do it for us. Episode 12 will come your way next week. Once again, thank you to Peter Harling for joining us for episode 11, and we'll see you next week for episode number 12, the Blue Note Podcast, the Believe Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Ethan Carter SW. You can follow Mike on Twitter at
Danger Powers 19.
And we'll see you next week for episode 12.
Thank you for watching Believe. You can find more great content at Believe.com. That's BLEAV.com. Do you believe?